Now I think I say all of that because there is a pressure going to come within our movement that is already there from unions that are here tonight, where people, and we have to say it up front, who are in a situation where they are so closely linked, I've given £70 million of trade unionist money to the Labour Party, that undoubtedly it can have an effect when we have to consider what we need to do. Now I'm saying this openly, I have this debate on the General Council, not because I don't think anybody should be affiliated to the Labour Party, each union makes its own mind up, but because I think unless we can reject this argument that things could be worse so we really shouldn't do much, we are going to be hamstrung, and we're not actually going to effectively have any opposition. So I think we have to say the Tories are going to win the election. It looks inevitable, unless, even at this stage, Labour does a bit of a turn and tries to reconnect with 6 million public sector workers, the people who care about services in this country, and say, well, we're actually going to stop attacking you and get a value. Now, if they did that, the political situation in this country could be transformed. Because at a stroke, we would see that there was real difference between what people were advocating. Now, Alistair Darling came to the TUC last week, and being great believers, Jeremy and I have always concentrating on what's possible. We were asked in the media, I did an interview where they said, what do you want him to come and say? And I said, well, actually, I think he could transform the conference if he came and said this. I'm a bit worried that under Labour, the gap between rich and poor has increased. I actually think this big increase in inequality is a bit wrong, so we're going to do something about it. And we're going to do three things, three simple things that could have been done. We'll have a windfall tax on the energy companies who are making £3 billion worth of profits, after you've seen while people's electricity and gas bills go up 20 to 30%. So they've got the money, that's quite simple. And we're going to give it to working families and say, there you are, you pay your bills. I think that'd be pretty popular. I think the only ones who wouldn't like it are the bosses of the energy companies, and quite frankly, I think they can squeal because they can afford to pay. Secondly, he could have said, I'll stop cutting jobs in Inland Revenue, HMRC, PCS members, because I'm also concerned that there is £25 billion a year in tax that people aren't paying. And it's not the people that benefit cheats that they don't lie detector tests for. These are people who run companies and they're very rich. And they employ lawyers and they run around the place with all the loopholes. It's £25 billion a year. If he collected that off the people who can afford to pay, every public sector worker in Britain could have a 5% pay rise and he'd still have £17 billion left. I think he could do quite a lot with 17 billion. So this is quite easy stuff. Very achievable. I think it would be quite popular. Thirdly, he could accept that any policy that treats a person on £300,000, chief executive of a public sector organisation, the same as it treats a benefit worker, tax worker, or a teacher on £13,000, £14,000, £20,000 is morally bankrupt, and it is our job to challenge it. Because the idea that we can all equally pay for the economic crisis is completely flawed. We cannot afford to pay for the economic crisis. We cannot be asked to take cuts in our living standards whilst all of this goes on and prices in the shops are rising massively. Inflation today, the government's own chosen fiddle figure of inflation, up to 4.7%. People's pay rises in the public sector, 2.5% downwards. Some PCS members getting a 0%. So I think we have to see the privatisation and the attack on the public sector in a wider context. We have to see it with a government that has so utterly lost its bearings and lost the plot that our job has to be to challenge it. A, because that's probably the only thing that can effectively stop the Tories winning a landslide. And B, because even if that doesn't happen, it's what our members pay their union subscriptions for. They pay us union subscriptions for the union to organise and fight in their defence. They don't elect me to be a politician and say Alistair Darling is going to be better than George Osborne. They pay for me to organise a campaign to try and challenge the things that are being done. So that brings me really to my concluding point that I think links this all together, which is all these privatisations are completely unacceptable. We've defeated some privatisations. In PCS, only recently, a fantastic campaign was run with Prospect that stopped the privatisation of Vosa. Brilliant campaign run by PCS. There's been other successes, but we've lost a lot as well. And all these horror stories we've learned have been when we suffered setbacks. And we've never quite got it right. But how we challenge some of these privatisations? How do you legally challenge a privatisation? How do we link up the issues? How can we stop academy schools and stop private prisons and the privatisation of probation and the privatisation of welfare? How do we bring ourselves together to challenge it? I think we need to do that politically, and I think we need to do that increasingly by industrially working together. So how much would the mood change if our unions were able to effectively win a campaign over something meaningful like pay, where we could turn the government's policy round and actually ensure that people were getting inflation-proof pay rises? I think if we can do that, and I think we can, it will transform the mood of the unions, and transform the mood of many people in this country who will actually see they have not just got to sit back and let it all happen and see who wins. So it's about concentrating in the here and now about what we can do. Now, the government's public sector pay policy is obscene, but it's given us a golden opportunity to say whether you're in Unison, or NAPO, or the POA, or PCS, or the NUT, if all of us are facing a position where none of us can get inflation pay rises, it's obvious, isn't it, that we should challenge it together. It is no point trying to challenge it separately on our own if it is one central government policy. What we did on pensions when we won what I think was one of the most notable achievements in the trade union movement. It defended 3.5 million people's public sector pensions, because 8 unions balloted for industrial action simultaneously. And when I was here last year, in this room, I argued for exactly this policy, and everybody thought it was sensible. And here we are, a year on, and we have had NUT, PCS and UCU taking coordinated action, and we've had Unison in local government taking action where some PCS members were also coordinated in the DSA and elsewhere. What we have not had is the type of coordination that this obviously makes sense and could transform the situation in this country.